Hi, we're Diamond and Silk, and we love the Naked Truth Report.
Warning, the following program has been rated T for truth.
You can't handle the truth!
Oh, we think you can. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report with your host, truth warrior and mythbuster Kathleen Wells. The place where we distinguish fact from fiction, where data is used to drive points home, and where Kathleen takes the position that Democrats and black politicians have destroyed black America. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report. Now, your host, Kathleen Wells.
Welcome to the Naked Truth Report. I'm your host, Kathleen Wells. This is going to be an exciting show because we have our guest, Michael Cutler. He's the expert on immigration. But before I bring him on, I want to mention a few things naturally. Yes, what is the main thing what is the monkey wrench that has been thrown in? Well, yeah, it's the passing of, what is she known as? Notorious RBG. Her passing has thrown a monkey wrench in everything. We anticipated, well, everyone was anticipating that she wouldn't live forever. We just didn't know when. I don't want to say that she wouldn't live forever. I should say that her passing, it would be sooner rather than later. But we didn't know when, right? Well, this has changed things dramatically. In fact, Nancy Pelosi indicated if President Trump, who has indicated he is going to name someone next week, a nominee next week, but she has indicated that she may impeach him if Trump tries to get a nominee named before, or if he tries to get someone named. Mitch McConnell has mentioned that they will definitely take it up in the Senate. Now, I heard today that they may not necessarily, the full Senate may not vote on it before the election, but they will subsequent during the lame duck period. But before the election, the Senate will definitely, the committee on nominating Supreme Court justice will definitely take it up next week. Trump will be nominating his candidate. I've discussed repeatedly, or I had a show that was titled 5 or 6 Decades of Liberal Ideology Has Destroyed Black America, has destroyed all of America. Why? For one, it has destroyed our families. Liberal ideology has destroyed our families. And why is that important? Because the family is the most important institution in society. I've said, I'm preaching to the choir. I say the same things over and over. We know that. So why is Notorious RBG known as a great? Why is she known as a great American when she has destroyed the fabric? Her decisions, her ideology, liberal ideology, has destroyed the fabric of America, and that fabric is the American family. 5 decades ago, we didn't have single parenthood like we do today, right? We all know that. And what we learned from my guest last week, Michael Calder, is that politics is not about principles, but about power, right? So Trump has the power to nominate. In fact, he's given that authority from the Constitution to nominate a new Supreme Court justice. His term is 4 years, and he has the power to nominate a Supreme Court justice, and I'm sure he will take that initiative. As Obama nominated Merrick, what is his name? Merrick Gardner? That's not his, Garrett. I can't remember his last name. Merritt? I can't remember. Anyway, Obama nominated, but Mitch McConnell, the Senate was run by Republicans at that time when Obama nominated his candidate. So therefore, the Senate, it was Mitch McConnell. He didn't take up Merrick Garland, I think it is. He didn't take, Yeah, he didn't take him up. Anyway, let me bring on, I'm just rambling on. My guest, Michael Cutler, will be much more focused because we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about, I'm rambling, we're going to talk about immigration / illegal aliens and / the Supreme Court, the U.S. Constitution also. So welcome, Michael Cutler, to the Naked Truth Report.
Kathleen, thank you so much for having me. The one thing that I do have to observe, Ruth Bader Ginsburg actually came from my neighborhood, went to the same high school that my kids went to. In fact, there was a moot courtroom in that high school with her name on it. And right after 9/11, the principal invited me to address the students of that high school about the threat of terrorism that we were very much still facing. And in fact, I just sent you an email with my prepared testimony for the 9/11 Commission because they requested that I provide my perspectives on immigration because it was determined by the Commission that multiple failures of the immigration system were at the root ability of terrorists, and not just the 9/11 hijackers, to repeatedly attack America, to enter the country, embed themselves, and carry out deadly attacks. That's how significant immigration is. But the one thing I will say about why Ruth Bader Ginsburg is being acknowledged for being a great American, and I personally believe she was, think of the relationship she had with Antonin Scalia. You know, what is so tragic to me, the biggest crisis America faces today is that Americans look across the political aisle at their neighbors, at their family members, at their co-workers as the enemy if they don't agree with them. That's un-American. We're supposed to disagree. That's what the First Amendment was about. I used to be a big fan of the American Civil Liberties Union, but they've come off the rails. Mm-hmm. Remember that famous statement, I disagree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it.
Right.
And it's remarkable that when you look at the rioters, it's our way or the highway. Well, I'm glad they think they're large and in charge. But if they truly got their way and destroyed America, waiting in the wings is the most totalitarian government imaginable, China. Mm-hmm. And I guarantee you that the protesters will be the first ones lined up against the wall. They just don't understand history because they've been told to ignore history. And we have teachers who have forgotten the most important thing they can teach their children, and I don't care if they're kindergarten teachers. You know, go back to what Einstein said. Concepts are far more important than facts. And what are we failing to teach our children today? How to ask the proper questions. Voltaire said you judge a person's intelligence by the questions they ask. So if you can't have an open and honest discussion, a freewheeling conversation with your neighbors, we're doomed. And, you know, we don't have to agree on every issue, and most of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's positions were positions I opposed. Some of her positions I agreed with. You know, we're not put in cubbyholes, one size fits all. The outrageous statement by Biden, if you ain't voting for me, you can't be black, or something equally stupid and ignorant and hate-filled. No, we're complex human beings, and we agree on some issues and disagree on other issues. I have a friend that I've known forever. She used to be our tenant. I helped her sister-in-law when she was dying of cancer, and then my first wife, who had helped her, herself was diagnosed and passed away 34 years ago. We were on the phone today because it's the Jewish New Year, and no matter how you measure the year, I hope that all of you have a very happy, peaceful, and successful New Year, and healthy New Year. But the point is we disagree, and we're still very good friends. She's more like family than a friend to me, and we've forgotten how to do that. I hope in this new year that we will regain our ability to be civil towards one another and respectful towards one another. But what you're saying about what the liberals of today have done is absolutely right.
Well, Michael, I want to mention this. Michael, I want to mention this article that you've written called "The Truth About Immigration Can Unite All Americans." So, what is that truth? So, we'll be united. Well, if we knew the truth, we'd be united as Americans on that point.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let me ask you. I like to do this by asking questions. Would you vote for a law? Ask this of your friends that are angry with Donald Trump. Would you vote for a law that would keep out criminals, that would keep out rapists, and that would prevent people from coming to America and taking the jobs of Americans? Yes or no? Would you vote for such a law? I don't know anybody who wouldn't.
Well, no. The liberals, for liberals, that would be like a trick question. They would,
Well,
somehow they would turn it on its head. Do you
they
understand?
probably would try, but here's the point. Those issues are at the foundation of the current immigration laws that we've been enforcing since before 1952. What do you think of that? That's what it's about. It's not about race, but it's about how it's been presented. When Jimmy Carter started that nonsense that we're going to call aliens immigrants, and suddenly if you oppose the entry of anybody who's not a citizen, you're labeled anti-immigrant, that started the decline into this abyss that we're now plunging through. Look, nobody who's not a citizen has an absolute right to enter the country. Strangers don't have an absolute right to walk into your house. You have the right as a person who either rents an apartment or owns a home to say, no, I'm not letting you in. That's why they have to ring the doorbell. You know, knock-knock jokes are universal around the world. Everybody knows a stranger has to knock on your door to be given permission to enter. That's what the immigration laws are.
Yeah, but see,
Okay?
you're being principled. You're being principled. And what we've learned is that politics is not about principles, but about power.
Oh, no, it's not.
It's about power.
Both parties, by the way, both parties are guilty. And you know what's amazing? When one party is in total control, they want to change the rules of the game so they have absolute control. Never mind that in 2 years at the next election, they may be out of power. They're a separate breed unto themselves. You know, I've testified before 17 congressional hearings in the House and Senate. I was called by Democrats as well as Republicans. And I got to tell you, politicians are strange critters. They are not like you and I. All they care about is winning elections and getting political campaign contributions, which are nothing more than bribes. And then they have nothing but contempt for the people that they promised that they would represent once they're elected. You know, they remind me of the high school football player who spends the night with the cheerleader, promises her everything until they spend the evening, and the next morning he can't remember her name. How's that for an analogy?
So tell me, how has notorious RBG, or rather liberal jurists, how have they impacted the immigration of America in the last 5 decades?
Profoundly.
Talk about it.
Profoundly, but I got to tell you, the conservatives did also, because they wanted the cheap labor, and they wanted, you know, the profits for their friends that supported the conservative agenda. And I have to make one point, and then I'm going to answer your question directly. You know, a lot of conservatives, and you hear them say it all the time, capitalism doesn't guarantee outcome, only opportunity. And if it works properly, they're right. And even my little puppy that we just adopted is a capitalist. If you wanted to do something, you have to give her a reward. That's really what capitalism is at its foundation. But think about golden parachutes. Think about the CEOs of companies that screw up royalty, drive their companies to the verge of bankruptcy. They're fired, but they're escorted out of the building with a check of tens of millions of dollars, where if the average schmo screws up, they walk him out of the building with an armed guard to make sure he doesn't take the stapler with the company logo on it. So everybody wants what they want. But what the liberals have done, and I wrote an article about it, that in order for the Democrats to succeed, Americans must fail. My dad wisely told me as a kid, if you want to turn a capitalist into a communist, take away his money. How do you take away his money? You force Americans to compete with foreign workers for their jobs. You displace Americans. You drive down wages, and you push the whole country to the left. That's what's going on, and it's been going on for decades now.
It's been going on for 6 decades at least.
Least for 6 decades.
Yeah.
Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, and also I just read an article in USA Today that written by 2 lawyers or law professors that that's explicitly stated that the Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution that requires the president to be a natural-born citizen should be done away with so that immigrants could run for president. Can you imagine?
Well, look, you have California that want to allow illegal aliens to run for office and vote.
See, and this is the thing. Everything with Democrats is a slippery slope. You know, like just as we got same-sex marriage, now on all cable shows, there are homosexual relationships. We see men kissing and in bed together, particularly on the OWN network. Have you noticed? everything with Democrats is a slippery slope. So now this issue about immigrants, they're trying to give immigrants, our first generation Americans, our people, they're trying to give them this lofty, our special statute, more than this special place, more than, better than Americans that have been in the country for generations. Would you agree?
Well, and it goes beyond that. They're undermining the civil rights laws. Let me tell you how. The whole idea to the civil rights laws was to compensate American blacks for slavery, for Jim Crow, for segregation, for all of the suffering that they were made to endure because of the terrible policies of America. And look, I don't buy in. I agreed with President Trump completely when he said we need the 1776 Commission, not the 1619 project. America of today is not the land of slavery. The people who perpetrated that atrocity are long gone. The idea of reparations, my mother-in-law from my first wife was in a concentration camp. She got reparations from the German government or the Polish government. She was in a concentration camp. Her family was wiped out. That makes sense. But we didn't get any reparations because my grandmother was killed in Poland. I was named for her. The idea that America can't ever redeem itself because at our beginnings we did terrible things is insanity. We don't hold children responsible for the crimes committed by their parents. We don't hold a country responsible for atrocities committed 200 years ago.
No, but this is what but it's not slavery. It's what happened subsequent to slavery for Black Americans.
And I agree with you.
We have been relegated.
And that's why we had so.
Black Americans have been, I've said, they've been relegated to a permanent underclass because of black codes and all that, Jim Crow, right? Convict leasing.
I agree with you.
Redlining, but also high immigration and illegal aliens. You see, these folks are coming into the country and keeping Black Americans relegated to this permanent. Yeah, okay.
That's why they're doing it. And look, when I hear this nonsense that the immigrants are now the focus of the new civil rights, baloney.
Yeah, exactly.
Civil right means the right to be a 100 complete participant in society. Absolutely, every American must be a full participant, must have equal opportunities, must have equal education. Look at all the Supreme Court decisions. Separate but equal is not equal. Everything that was done was designed to make up for the horrors that were visited on American blacks over the centuries, right?
Right, but that's...
Now when you start to say that illegal aliens are going to be treated the same way, what you're really doing is erasing the distinction that was made to compensate Black Americans for the madness that they faced because of their color and racism.
But it's the 14th. It's the 14th Amendment you're talking about. It's the 14th Amendment
and
liberal.
14th Amendment.
Yeah, liberal jurists, including notorious RBG. I'm sorry. Say that again.
It's not only the 14th Amendment. The whole idea about equal employment. So, what kind of equal employment do you have when you import more foreign workers than the number of new jobs you're creating? Mm-hmm. What does that do to opportunities for Americans? All Americans to work. All Americans to get a decent wage. If you haven't noticed, the buying power, the purchasing power of the average American has plummeted. Mm-hmm. Okay? Why is that? Because we have flooded America, not just with illegal aliens, but with the high-tech visas, and you've had Republicans responsible for it also. Let's remember Bob Goodlatte, who was the Republican chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. He was always trying to push more H-1B visas. You know why? Because before he went to Congress, he was an immigration lawyer who made a fortune with H-1B visas. And when I had a real tough meeting with him, we spent a half hour together, he told me how his brilliant son would love to have tens of thousands of brilliant Indian programmers come to America. And my late wife, my first wife who passed away years ago, was a brilliant programmer, Phi Beta Kappa graduate, MBA computer scientist, and most of her friends had comparable backgrounds. They said, what about them? And he didn't want to answer me. So I looked up who his son was. Bobby Goodlatte got his start with Zuckerberg at Facebook, and that's why he wants lots of Indian programmers to drive down wages and displace Americans. This is a war on Americans by the government that allegedly was elected to represent us. Abraham Lincoln spoke of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. That's what Trump talks about, and everyone goes nuts. Oh, my God, what is he doing? He's dividing us. No, he's not. He's uniting Americans together, saying we take care of our own before we take care of the rest of the world. What the Democrats have done, aided and abetted by the Republicans, not all, some, has been to undermine all the civil rights laws, all the equal employment opportunity laws, everything that was enacted to try to compensate for what was wrong in the past is being eradicated through the importation of massive numbers of foreign workers. How insane is that? What level of betrayal is that?
It is a betrayal of the American people. It's a betrayal of Black Americans. And it's
It certainly
crazy
is.
when you have Black Americans. I hear it on Washington Journal calling and praising Notorious RBG. It's absurd, okay? Because that informs you that they're not informed. They don't know how the family has been destroyed by liberal ideology, how the liberal just jurists have bastardized the 14th Amendment. Everyone is now entitled to rights via the 14th Amendment.
Well, it was funny. When Jimmy Carter said that we had to start to refer to illegal aliens as undocumented immigrants.
Oh, was it Jimmy Carter?
Oh, yes. And I was so angry. I was an agent. And I said, why don't we call them pre-citizens? And it stuck. I mean, everyone that I worked with, including Border Patrol agents, started to refer to illegal aliens as pre-citizens.
But what was his rationale for doing that?
Well, I think he was looking, again, to find a political equation. Jimmy Carter was the first president to order that immigration agents make no arrests during the census unless Washington cleared it. So we had a guy arrest somebody who was a murderer and almost got suspended because he didn't ask Washington for permission. What law enforcement agency is ordered to not make arrests during the census? Well, why did he want that? Because he wanted to make certain that illegal aliens were counted and they tended to live in Democrat strongholds. This was an effort to gerrymander electoral districts, congressional districts, and the Electoral College. Again, everything Carter did, going back to your point, they look at politics as the game all by itself. They don't care about the implications. They just want power. Mm-hmm. And they don't care what they're willing to do. I'm not a particularly religious person, although I'm proud of my Jewish heritage. But I will tell you, we all know about the wisdom of Solomon, where two women both claimed to be a baby's mother, and there was no DNA testing. So Solomon, being brilliant as he was, came upon a solution to figure out who was who. And he offered to have this baby cut in half and have each mother get a piece of the baby. And he knew darn well that the true mother would not allow a hair on that baby's head to be harmed. And sure enough, one woman said, "Get out that knife and give me my half." And the other woman freaked out and said, "Oh, my goodness, better the other woman should have my child than some harm should come to him." And clearly we knew who the real mother was at that moment. Look at Pelosi. Look at Schumer. Look at these politicians who don't care how they destroy America, right, as long as they get their cut.
Right. She's willing to. Nancy is willing to have another. Analogy? Yeah, Nancy is willing to have another impeachment. There's the music. When we come back from the break, I want you to talk about this recent California Court of Appeals decision that allowed Trump to get rid of, or gave Trump permission to get rid of temporary protective status. Approximately 300,000 immigrants. From El Salvador, Haiti, Nicaragua, and
not immigrants, aliens. We have to use the right word. There's a reason, you'll see after the break.
Okay, we'll be right back.
Aliens, and that's the proper term.
Okay, this is Michael Cutler, and as my guest on the Naked Truth Report, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. My guest is Michael Cutler. He's an expert on immigration. In fact, he worked for the INS for 30 years, right, Michael? 30 years?
30 years, yep. I started as an immigration inspector at Kennedy Airport, did that for 4 years. I spent a year as an adjudications officer doing the marriage interviews we've seen in the movies. And then I spent the balance of my time as a special agent. I rotated through all the squads. I worked on terrorism. I was the first INS agent assigned to the Unified Intelligence Division of the Drug Enforcement Administration in New York. And then I spent the last 10 years of my career as an INS agent assigned to the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. I've been before a bunch of congressional hearings, give testimony to the 9/11 Commission. By the way, my website is Michael Cutler, Cutler, michaelcutler.net. I do an awful lot of writing for Front Page Magazine, frontpagemag.com. I do podcasts for Team DML at dmlnews.com. And I'm thrilled to be on your program this evening.
I'm delighted to have you. I brought you back because you were my guest, my audience rather, wanted you back. That's why. Yeah, you're very popular on my
Well, I'm
show.
honored.
Yeah, they
I'm
appreciate.
honored.
I'm sure they appreciate the information. So this is one thing I wanted to mention before I got into the temporary protective status issue that was
Sure.
recently. Trump mentioned in his interview with Mark Levin this evening that he would
Okay.
like the libel laws looked at again. You know, New York Times versus
Yeah.
Sullivan impacted. If you're a public person, there's such a high bar, a high standard
Yeah.
to overcome that one can't overcome it. So this is what's interesting because now if we have conservative jurists, if he appoints one more jurist, if he appoints a jurist, will be 6-2 conservative. Well, and Roberts is sort of, he goes back and forth, but he isn't necessarily,
Yeah.
he's in the middle or whatever. But it will
He's
be,
a ping pong ball.
yeah, it will be 6-2 conservative. So what I'm saying, we've had 6 decades of liberal ideology coming out of the Supreme Court, and we see where we are today. Don't you feel like it's time for a
damaging.
change?
I agree with you, and the libel is I agree with. I've been labeled anti-immigrant by the B'nai B'rith, by the Anti-Defamation League. It infuriates me. Back in college, I was the president of a B'nai B'rith group on my campus, and I am not anti-immigrant. You see, that's the lie being told by the media. I'm pro-enforcement, not anti-immigrants. And, the same laws that tell us who to keep out and who to kick out, and if you go to Title 8, United States Code Section 1182, and I frequently put the link to that section of law in my article so that you see what I'm telling you is based on fact, not myth, nonsense, or rumor. That's about keeping out aliens with dangerous communicable diseases. Let's remember Ellis Island was a quarantine station. Aliens who are mentally ill, criminals, terrorists, human traffickers, drug smugglers, people who were previously deported. And then we get to aliens who would become a public charge or if they worked with displaced Americans. There's nothing wrong with that law. And, those same laws that tell us who to keep out tell us who to admit. And every year we admit roughly 1 million lawful immigrants. That's more than the rest of the world combined. And we have Biden and Harris saying we're going to legalize everyone who's here. I mentioned it last week. I have to repeat it because if they got their way, the actual number of immigrants who are likely to get green cards within 1 or 2 years, hold on to your seats, folks, could be 100 million. You didn't mishear me. 100 million. Even the universities admit that there's probably close to 25 million illegal aliens in the country. I would argue that number is way smaller than reality. But let's work with their number. They would immediately have the right to bring every single one of their minor children and their spouses to America overnight. And third world families typically have many children. So I'm going to be an optimist and say, okay, they will average 4 each because some may have 10, some may have 0. Let's say it's 4 each. 4 times 25 million is 100 million school-aged children. It would devastate the education system, and within a few short years, they would join the overflowing labor pool, and then Americans can forget about any hope for employment or good wages. And they want to destroy, the Democrats want to destroy the suburbs. They want to stop one-family houses and build tall buildings because they are planning to flood America with tens of millions of immigrants. Why? Because if you drive people into poverty, which is what happens, we saw it in Venezuela, this isn't speculation, you will force Americans to vote for the party of the handout. They remind me of the drug dealer who gets kids hooked on crack, gives them out free samples, and he knows that he's now got customers for the rest of his life. That's what the Democrats are looking to do.
And so they're not interested in the interests of the American people. And we learned that last week with my guest, Michael Calder, talking about the assassination of JFK. Their interest is power, not principle. Why don't we take a call?
Right, and that's why
Yeah.
you see the drugs being legalized, and
Yeah.
you don't see any commercials on TV warning about the dangers of drugs. And you know what the drug money funds? Terrorists. We know from congressional hearings that Iran has flooded Latin America with operatives from Hezbollah and Hamas. They're working with human traffickers and drug smugglers to make money by selling the drugs. and inserting sleeper agents into the United States. And yet you didn't see Congress jumping up and down and saying, good, let's build the wall. It was Trump that did it. And by the way, the wall isn't designed to keep aliens out of America. Let's stop that myth. It's about making certain that aliens who enter go through the vetting process. I compare the wall on the border to the velvet rope in the bank that guides the customers to the next available teller. It's not designed to keep you out. It's designed to create an orderly process. What is wrong with that?
Oh yeah, we all believe. Listen. We're preaching to the choir. This is why I have to have.
But I hope your audience gets it, and then they've got to speak to their neighbors.
Yeah.
Have calm
Yeah.
conversations, because your neighbors have been drinking the Kool-Aid.
Right.
They don't want to admit they're wrong, because people feel foolish when they have to say, gee, I'm wrong. When your friend gets a great deal on a new car, he calls you up. He says, just got a brand new Corvette. You know what I paid for it? You're not going to believe what a great deal. When was the last time someone called you up and said, I was snookered? This guy took advantage of me. Nobody calls you to brag about that. Your neighbors have been snookered. They've been conned. This is no different from what Madoff did. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to admit that they've been conned. Be gentle with them, but look at the facts, because as John Adams said, facts are stubborn things. And so let's look at the fact of what happened just now with the Ninth Appeals Court, in the Ninth Circuit Court in California.
Right.
We have something called temporary protective status. America is the most compassionate country on the planet. Our aircraft carriers don't only serve as platforms for warplanes, but as ways of providing help to countries that have problems. Because they have nuclear generators on board, they can provide electricity, food, medical care. It's a floating city that shows up to help countries that are devastated. That's what America is. We're at our best when we're compassionate. And by the way, I just have to throw in and look at that amazing success President Trump scored in the Middle East with Israel and the countries surrounding Israel. Unbelievable. Of course, Pelosi calls it a distraction. I mean, she just lies. And the woman of the bad hair day, that's what I think of her as being. So in this capacity, if a country is devastated by a revolution, by an earthquake, by a tsunami, some catastrophe, and their people are in the United States, we're not going to send them back to be in a catastrophe. We're not going to tell women and children, go home, there's a nightmare in your country, that's your problem, not our problem. No, we allow them to stay here. The same thing with DACA, deferred action. If a family visits and they get sick, or there's a tragedy in the family, or their grandfather has a heart attack, we don't force them to leave. You can stay, just have a doctor provide us with evidence that there's an emergency in the family. Obama turned it into a blanket net that he was going to drop over millions of people. It was a backdoor amnesty, but we've always been compassionate. So there were 4 countries in particular whose citizens were able to stay here temporarily because of catastrophes. And those countries were El Salvador, Haiti, Nicaragua, and the Sudan. And Trump said, okay, listen, the emergency occurred a long time ago. Things are back to normal. You need to go home. And the screaming was unbelievable. I spoke at a Republican Party event a couple of years ago, right after the president was elected, and a minister from Haiti said, my God, you want to see immigrants deported back to Haiti? I said, we're not talking about immigrants. And that's why words and language are critical. This isn't political correctness. This is all Orwellian newspeak to confuse people by using deceptive language, okay? And I said, no one is deporting immigrants. We're talking about illegal aliens that were permitted to stay here, permitted to work, permitted to send money home, get medical care, have their kids enroll in our schools. What more could we do? But the emergency is over. But they need to be able to live here forever. I said, what is the letter T in TPS? What does the T stand for? And he said, temporary. And I said, Reverend, all due respect, can you define temporary for me? Does it mean that no one lives forever, so that's temporary? They should be able to stay here for the rest of their lives because we gave them temporary status? I said, do you have a green card? He said, I do. I said, is anyone going to force you to go back to Haiti? You are an immigrant. We're not talking about immigrants. Let's be clear about language. And he just looked at me, shrugged his shoulders, sat down. I got a round of applause. I wasn't trying to be mean, but we have to understand what temporary means. And there's a cost. If we have 300,000 people in America and they're working, those are 300,000 jobs that Americans need. If you have all those children in our schools, it makes the schools more crowded. I want to make certain that American children gets first crack at everything that America has to offer. You don't give money to charity when your own children are going to bed hungry at night, and lots of kids in America, particularly black American children, are going to bed hungry at night. So we need to look out for Americans first. That's what America first means. That's what Abraham Lincoln meant, government of the people, by the people, for the people. And up until now, the courts have kept on pushing against this and saying, no, they have to be able to stay forever. The president doesn't have any discretion. Never mind the laws, never mind what's happened in the past. Suddenly, the Ninth District looked at the totality of circumstances, and they ruled, yes, the president can send them home. And here's something I want everybody to think about. I agree with women and children and the elderly and so forth, people like that being able to stay in America when there's a calamity in their home country. But can someone explain to me, because this confuses my feeble mind, why do we allow young, able-bodied men to stay in America when there's a catastrophe in their home country and they're working on construction sites in the United States? When a country suffers that kind of a calamity, and houses are washed away, and shopping centers are devastated, and schools are wiped out, and hospitals are destroyed by catastrophes, don't you think that the first thing that those countries need to do is to get their hands on able-bodied construction workers who can help them rebuild? If you could put up a roof in a house in Brooklyn, New York, then darn it, you could put up a house in Haiti or Nicaragua or the Sudan, couldn't you?
Well, that's called a brain drain. When we're taking people out of
It's called a brain drain.
Yeah.
And it's also called a way of keeping Americans from supporting themselves. My father was a construction worker. He was a tradesman. He supported me. He supported my mother. I literally carried him off his job his last day of work. I was 19. He was 57 because he had worked in the Navy shipyards during the Second World War. And those construction workers do tough, dangerous, backbreaking, filthy work without complaint. They are happy to get the jobs. They've been losing their jobs to people who shouldn't be here for decades. Isn't it time that we honored American, hard-working Americans who build this country? And I think Trump gets it because his father, because of his real estate business, was a construction guy. Trump sounds like the construction workers that I grew up with when I was a kid in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm. So, yes, these policies coming out of the Supreme Court for decades have been harming the American people. Why don't we take a call now?
Anti-American policies.
Right. Why don't we take a call now from Carlos?
Absolutely.
Hi, Carlos. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report.
Very interesting program here. Mr. Cutler, I believe 2 weeks ago you mentioned that the sole reason why there was a facilitation of immigration, illegal and legal, from our political entities here was economics. I kind of think that there's other factors. They allow all these different cultures to come in and races so they can be pitted against each other and create chaos. It's called a Hegelian dialectic, okay? Because the powers that be thrive on chaos, and that's how they control people more and more and more. That's what we're seeing with Black Lives Matter right now. But I believe there's also a eugenics component in that as people come here and start intermarrying and integrating, they start losing their identity, their homogeneous ancestral traits, and that's what the people way up at the top want, because once you lose your identity, you no longer identify with a particular region. And so they become susceptible, really, for a world government where they say, well, everybody's integrated. We don't need borders anymore. And
I think that's true. I think that I hear.
Well, I don't know about intermarriage, but I do believe that the goal is to take down the borders, one world government. And you had George Herbert Walker Bush, if you remember, talking about the New World Order. I mean, that was terrifying to hear coming from that president, I have to tell you.
But listen, this is what he's saying. If we're all beige, if we're all mixed, like beige people,
Yep.
or like mulattoes or whatever. Americans are now all mulattoes. We don't have any identity as Black Americans or Irish.
The goal is certainly that, homogeneous, and so we're going to blend everybody together.
Right, blend everyone together.
This is what I believe. What I believe is this. I'm very proud of my ethnicity and my culture. Everyone has the right to be. At the end of the day, I believe in e pluribus unum, out of many one, but we should be able to maintain our individual identities. That's what makes our nation so rich. Being a New Yorker, we have everybody from everywhere, at least we used to. Everybody's bailing out of New York because of this imbecile governor we have and the imbecile mayor. But yes, there should be a certain amount of ethnic pride in who we are, and I see a movement to destroy that ethnic pride.
And then we'll all be susceptible to we're all beige, we're all just blended together, and so our borders, it doesn't matter. We have no identity. We can just open the borders. That's what he's saying. I kind of agree with that. Okay, Linda, welcome to the Naked Truth Report.
Oh, yes. There's something I want to add to what the both of you were saying. Here in California, everybody needs to quickly go on to Recall Gavin Now 2020 to get the nuisance recalled, because he's been adding more illegal aliens, more and more and more, than the previous governors. More.
He's been adding them. I don't know. Go ahead, Michael.
We should be able to do recalls on all of them. If you buy a faulty refrigerator, you're able to return it. We certainly have lots of faulty politicians, don't we?
And this whole climate, the fires that are taking place in California is not because of. It's because of the lack of management of the forest floor.
Bad forest husbandry. But this is always the case. They'll find an excuse to defer blame when they themselves are the cause of the problem. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's very disappointing. Well, I really appreciate you being on the show, Michael. We have 3 more minutes. We have 3 more minutes. Why don't you sign out, give them some information where people can hear your show and so on and so forth.
Sure. I do a blog talk radio program on Friday nights, the Michael Cutler Hour. My website is michaelcutler.net. I do a lot of writing for years now for Front Page Magazine, the David Horowitz Freedom Center. I also do podcasts for Dennis Michael Lynch team, DML at dmlnews.com. But really, what I want everyone to understand, I always like to make the point that democracy is not a spectator sport. If what you see happening alarms you, if you're a parent or an aunt or an uncle, this is about our children. It's about the generations to follow. And when you think about the sacrifices made by the men and women of the military and law enforcement being denigrated by politicians who don't care about America, we need to get them out of office. I don't care if they're with the Hopping Kangaroo Party. And we need to get our voices heard. That's what democracy is supposed to be about. The people are supposed to be running the government, not the other way around. So please get involved. Have those conversations with your neighbors. They've got to be peaceful, respectful. Remember, these folks have made mistakes, and you don't want to insult them or embarrass them. Just give them an easy way out to acknowledge that maybe they could have seen things from a different perspective. I've been very successful doing this with many people. I'm sure you can be also. And if you like my articles, please forward them to as many people as you can. Post it on Facebook or the other social media. Let's open up a conversation in America. The First Amendment, the freedom of expression, was the First Amendment for a good reason. And that's the reason that and the lunatic left are trying to shut down debate in the town square, because they know they can't win arguments that are based on fact or reality. All they can do is spread rumors and make accusations and intimidate people. And we're Americans. We shouldn't be intimidated.
Right. We're Americans. We shouldn't be intimidated. But now, after listening to you and Michael Calder, this is what politics is. It's drenched in corruption. But it's for us, the American. Yeah, it's drenched. It's for us, the American people, to be engaged and be involved.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen out there, Truth Warriors. Get out there and talk to your friends in a nice way, and explain to them what's actually going on. Be proactive. So, Michael Cutler, thank you for being a guest on the Naked Truth Report. I'll have you on again. Okay.
I love it. My privilege. Have a happy, healthy, safe, and peaceful New Year, everybody, no matter how you measure the year.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. I'll see you, Truth Warriors, next week. Next week, we're going to have Michael Calder again to talk about RFK and the assassination. And then the following week, we're going to have someone who's running for the school board. He's going to tell us some dirty business that's going on with the school board in Santa Barbara. We'll be back next week. Thanks again.